Hmm. It's super interesting, Dr. Moreland. I'm so grateful. So could you maybe talk a little bit, maybe about like one particular case of an NDE that really seems to point towards like this idea of like, well, at least with like consciousness and whatnot, like there's something much more than like the physical processes going on here?
Well, yeah, and not only is there consciousness, but there's a self or a soul,
Mm.
because consciousness doesn't float around on its own. It belongs to something. Thoughts have thinkers.
Yeah.
Uh, Pains have a person that has the pain. So the soul is what leaves, not just consciousness. And it's very difficult. There was one person. This is reported by uh, Chauncey Crandall, who is for decades has been the head of a cardiac center in Florida, in Palm Beach, Florida,
Mm.
and he has worked there for, I don't know, 25 years, and he's the head of the thing. Well, he there was this big 250-pound gang member that was brought in and had a thin, his heart muscle was thin, and so they were going to operate. He's tattoos all over him, and so the nursing and other doctor was there, and the team was ready, and they put him under, put an IV in him, and during the procedure, he coded, he died, and uh, the people started running around like chaos, although it was organized, but to a viewer who doesn't know, it was chaotic. And one of the nurses, however, ran through across where the IV was line was,
Mm.
and knocked the needle out of this guy's arm. Now he didn't feel it; he was going. He was dead.
Mm.
He was brain dead. He had no gag reflex, and there was nothing. His body was not functioning at all in any sense. And so the Dr. Crandall got down on his hands and knees and crawled under the operating table to find the needle and clean it off and put it back in. They tried paddles to bring this guy back, and the paddles weren't working. So a nurse tried to plug the paddles into other outlets in the room, thinking maybe there's something wrong with that outlet, and tried 4 or 5 times. Eventually, they realized it was the paddles, not the outlets, and so
Mm.
she left and went down to the uh, to the radiology room and got some new paddles and brought it back and brought this guy back, and they stabilized him. And Dr. Crandall said that we were all too tired, and this guy was in no position to be operated on. So we just stabilized him, and he went to sleep, and we left. The next morning, I came in to do my rounds, and I went by his room, but I didn't hear any movement, so I thought he was asleep, and I decided just to not bother him. And he said I walked past his room, and all of a sudden I felt myself being lifted off the floor, and my feet were dangling, and somebody had a hold of the back of my gown. And he said, "You sob, why did you bring me back?"
Mm.
And Crandall said, "Well, if you'll let me down, maybe we can talk about it." So he did, and it was this guy. And Crandall said, "Well, that when you, I don't understand. That's my job. I was trying to save your life." He said, "Look, I was experiencing a peace and a joy like I've never experienced in my life, and I saw the whole darn thing from up on the ceiling, and I saw you crawling on the floor like a stuck pig, trying to find the 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 needle that went in my arm, that the nurse had knocked out, and you finally put it back in. I saw the gal try different outlets, and she was trying to put the paddle. I saw all that, and then she went somewhere and got it, and I was watching the whole. He described the other doctor and what he looked like, and this guy eventually, Crandall was did not know about these kind of things, and it blew his mind. And since then, he has continued to see this. Now, what happened is this guy eventually met Christ, and he's in pastoral ministry to the
Mm.
now. So I mean, look, Crandall could not make that up because there were other people in the room that saw this happen, and they work with him. So if he were to publish a book on this, He would have to try to make sure nobody read it that worked at the center, because they would all know he was lying through his teeth. This was publicly observed by the whole team, and it's just crazy. But it was a near-death experience that brought about his conversion. Some of them are hellish, like I said.